Hey everyone, it's a truly sleepy reader up far too late. I've got an early flight to catch tomorrow morning, but I've been puttering around and I just thought maybe talking about some of the comics from this giant pile of comics I wanted to talk about, maybe that'll help me sleep. And just an opportunity. Hopefully I can sleep on the plane too. I'm traveling without my family for the first time in years, probably since we had our child, visiting my parents on the other coast, 3,000 miles away, on my own. It's going to be fun in a way. It's still family, but it's kind of going to part of family and escaping family. Anyway, why don't I start with these two issues of Commandy Challenge? I'll try to talk about these pretty quickly, but as most people know, each issue of Commandy Challenge is by different creators, and each one leaves the next set with a cliffhanger that they have to solve. I oops. With this one, the one that was by Pete Tomasi and Neil Adams, I thought the best thing about it was how they solved the cliffhanger. I suppose it didn't really make sense logically, but I thought it was really cool and surprised me. But there was something about the art that was just kind of hard to take, and I kind of liked Adam's art in a cheesy kind of way in that last Superman book he did, but I felt like, maybe it's because I'm comparing it to Kirby, but I felt like the storytelling was just kind of out of whack. And I think back in his prime, Neil Adams was an incredible storyteller with his art. And it's almost reflected, I think, in the way he does his layouts now. I mean, he always had these dynamic layouts, but now things just kind of overlay each other, or, like you can see here with the different kind of almost like the panels are like pieces of paper laid over each other or something, that it's not so much telling the story as getting in its own way in some fashion. It's not horrible or anything, but and at the back of each issue, the previous issue's writer, or I thought it would be writer, explains what they were up to in this story and how they would have solved the problem. But the next issue is actually, in this issue, that the back part is actually written by Neil Adams, not by Pete Tomasi, and it doesn't discuss how they would have solved the plot, and it doesn't ever mention Pete Tomasi by name, and or maybe it does late in the article. I'm not sure now. I don't think he does mention Tomasi by name, so if you were to read it quickly, you would think that Adams was the writer of it, and so it leads me to kind of blame, Maybe Adams, because he's such a superstar, got more freedom or leeway to do add and remove story elements as he wanted. I don't know. But the other fun thing in here was the appearance of the Mobius chair from New Gods, so that was kind of cool, connecting it up. But anyway, I liked issue 3 much better, by the writer-artist team, the married couple of Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor. It had Paul Mount's coloring, and I'd say that, for me, was the only weak part. It wasn't horrible coloring, but I felt, Amanda Connor's art was so good, I felt like the coloring was too dark and didn't serve the tone of the art right somehow. Not in any big way, just in small ways. And it might look a lot better digitally, I suppose, on a screen than on paper. And it didn't look horrible. But I thought the Amanda Connor art was very good. I liked her reimagining of Commandy's world a lot. And the story was quite kind of creepy, because it has this cute quality, but then things are really creepy with animals eating these synthetic humans and stuff. So that was very cool. I don't think it's giving away too much to show the final splash page, which is super cool. So yeah, I was really, really pleased by this issue. It's not Kirby's Commandy, it's Palmiotti and Amanda Connor's Commandy, but I felt like they were doing really prime work, and it was really fun for prime work for this kind of project. So, whoops. It's an interesting thing about these that the A cover is by a different artist than the interior artist, and the variant covers are by the interior artist. Maybe I should be collecting the variant covers, but I've kind of told my shop to always give me the A covers, so I'm just go with that. Okay, another interesting one and very Kirby-esque was Black Hammer. So this is the issue 7, where we finally find out Black Hammer's story. And he's kind of a cross of two different Kirby characters. He's like Orion maybe from the New Gods and Thor. And he strikes his hammer on the ground and he becomes the Black Hammer. He's working with these it's like the New Gods who are led by Odin and also have a pug that's a lot like Lockjaw. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. It seemed more directly derivative of Kirby than the previous characters are directly derivative of any particular creator. Maybe that's just because Kirby looms so large, but it seemed like a slight shift in tone, and maybe also because what they were drawing on was a different... Well, Thor is a different part of the Silver Age, and the New Gods are an early part of the Bronze era. It just felt like from a different era than what the previous stuff had been drawn. But as always, I really enjoyed it. The only thing that makes me a little sad is it feels like maybe we're heading towards wrapping up the story, and I kind of wanted to spend like 20 or 30 issues in this slow-moving soap opera story about these aging superheroes who can't use their powers anymore. But I think with the appearance of Black Hammer's daughter and everything, that we're heading towards an ending. If that's the case, I really hope that Jeff Lemire decides to revisit this stuff later, because I feel like there's a lot about these characters that has been hinted at, and there could be a lot more about them. Kind of in my mind linked to it was this Crime Destroyer comic, in that it's sort of an homage of a different sort to Bronze Age superhero comics, for the most part. I love this cover, which is not by the interior artists, and the interior art is Herb Trimpe, inked by this kind of underground artist, I guess he is, named Benjamin Mara. I've now read a little bit of his work, which is on the, at least the stuff I read was on the, what's the word? When you violate people's mores and stuff. It was played with racism and sex and rape and prostitution and stuff in ways that were disturbing. And I guess we're either making fun of or in love with the cliches of rap music. But that's a whole nother story. When he inks Trimpe, it's actually a really fun art style, and I'd say this was the last thing Trimpe did, so it's not terrible, but it's not like peak Herb. Sorry, I say Trimpe, peak Herb Trimpe. It has a little less of the really strong moments that I think Trimpe sometimes had, but definitely a lot of trademark Trimpe paneling and storytelling. But the writing here, I thought was horrible. I really thought it was horrible. I guess the writer felt he was making fun of tropes and stuff, but he maybe didn't push it far enough, and his ideas weren't that clever. So, this bad guy was kind of cool to look at, but there was really very little going on with him. If it was making fun of comics at the time, I couldn't tell if it's a loving homage to comics at the time of this time, or if it's both those things. It just didn't come through very much. It just seemed like a very dry, uninteresting, poor man's Bronze Age comic in terms of the writing. So it was a lot of fun in the art, but quite disappointing in the writing. The coloring was a little odd. I don't know if you can see here, but on one hand, it kind of goes with the Bronze Age coloring, but it's not actual colors that I think they could have used in the Bronze Age for the most part, or would have used. So that was interesting. I didn't know what to make of it in terms of the coloring. Here's a really cool page. I wish there were more pages like that, but I wouldn't recommend picking this up, and yet I'll probably pick up the next one, because when I read a description of it, even though it's by the same writer, it did sound a little more satiric and over the top. So it will be focusing on this bullwhip character. So I'll look for that if I can get it. I'll grab it. Okay, Old Guard. I read the first 2 issues of Old Guard together. I like these covers. I guess they're kind of somewhat reminiscent of what is it? Of Lazarus covers, I guess, or some other covers that are being done lately. I had a lot of fun reading this. It's not at all deep. It's kind of like The Highlander, kind of like lots of other stories about immortals I've read in prose fiction. The idea that people will spend their immortality as mercenaries and soldiers is a little disturbing to me, and I guess so far I feel like Rucka just takes that as a given. I guess it makes for a fun, pulpy story, and that's what this is. It's kind of a fun, pulp story. The coloring is really nice. The art, this Fernandez, the art by Fernandez. I think I've seen better art by Fernandez. It's good, but it's a bit on the overly sketchy side, and the faces sometimes feel a little too loose or something. I don't know, like that face there of this guy smoking. So, yeah, it's fun. It's just a fun read. Fun, pulpy read, like I said. I've always heard people say how great Rucka is, but I don't think I've really read the great Rucka yet. So that's a lack in my reading. I'm a bit grumpy tonight, I guess. So it's been a grumpy-inducing week, other than the great presents I got from you, a couple of you YouTubers. That was really cool. Love this Paper Girls cover. It's definitely still the art that keeps me going with Paper Girls. Maybe it's the art that keeps me buying it in floppies. So floppies without ads, which these are perhaps the best way to read this or look at the art, rather than deal with the gutter of a trade. But reading wise, this really makes a lot more sense as a trade. There's a few interesting things that happen in this episode, some cool stuff. A few little more slivers of the mystery of what's going on are perhaps revealed to us. A few slivers of characterization. So I've probably said that already about Paper Girls, but man, I just really enjoy the art, and it is this wacky science fiction story that I enjoy. It always irritates me when people will talk about a science fiction story and say, but really it's all about the characters. No, it's got to be about the characters and the science fiction. And this does seem to be about the characters and the science fiction, although I've heard people say, well, it's kind of an apologist way of talking about science fiction when you say really it's all about the characters, as if it were about the science fiction, that's not good enough. If you're a quality person, characters matter, and science fiction doesn't matter. The science fiction could be crap, but if the characters are good, then it doesn't matter. But I feel like you have to have both be good. This is probably a science fiction story. uh, some of the things in here aren't delusions, I guess. It's weird because Terry Moore is playing a lot with delusions, not just of Motor Girl now, but we got one of our would-be strongmen who's been apparently captured by aliens, but there seems to be a lot of illusion and delusion going on with the aliens, and that's intriguing. A lot like Paper Girls, he's just giving us a sliver per issue. And it feels like it was a really fast read, and it was last number of issues. The art is great, but there's not that many pages. There's more pages in Paper Girls for less money and in color. This really seems to be telling me to go read the trade, and yet I've read about how Terry Moore's felt like he has to cut short his comics because he's not selling enough floppies. So I feel like I should support it in floppies, but because Terry Moore is out there on his own, doing his own thing. So I guess I will, now that I've said it out loud that way, I guess I like comic book art enough to pay the extra to support it, but I think this really would read much better in trade. I'm feeling quite impatient with it on a slow, slightly less than monthly pace with just this little bit. I didn't count. I like to count pages and things. So the last issue, the number of actual story pages was 19, I think, or maybe even 18. Now I'm going to count these right here in front of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 pages of actual story. You do get some sketches, which that's a very cool one. I like that a lot. Maybe that's the next cover. I don't know. And at the front, you get a little quote. And it's a classy package, but it feels a bit pushing me. If I'm supporting the artist, but what is he giving me for my $3.99? Yeah, I don't know. I'm a stingy, money, page-counting bastard. Black Cloud gave me quite a bit. Did I say $4.99 for $3.99 for $4? Black Cloud gave me a lot, and some wonderful Greg Hinkle art, wonderful coloring. Did Hinkle do the coloring? Matt Wilson did the coloring. That's actually why I put this on my pull list, because I figure I want to try everything. That's the black and white section, so Matt Wilson did last there. But anything colored by Matt Wilson is just extra pleasing. Actually, Paper Girls is colored by Matt Wilson too. So I can't figure out what this is really about yet. The only thing I get is there's this woman who can come into our world and at least take people into brief trips into her world, which she says is the world of story, but it just seems like this black and white world with some anthropomorphic animals and a kind of, I don't know, Prohibition era vibe to it. So I'm not sure how much there is there yet. I'll give it a few more issues. It's on my pull list already. I just put it on my pull list ahead of time, which might have been a mistake. So it could be a really cool story, and it could be a really dumb story. At this point, I can't tell from issue 1. I've been loving more and more The Flintstones, written by Mark Russell, with Steve Pugh usually doing the art, and there's been some fill-in issues by Rick Leonardi, who did the art in this sort of, instead of an annual, we're going to have a bizarre team up of Booster Gold and the Flintstones. And it was written by Mark Russell, and it was interesting, but it just did not feel nearly as strong as the Flintstones books themselves. It focused far, far more on Booster Gold, who is not a character I like a whole lot, but he used him in a mocking comedic way that was pretty effective, and there was lots of cool little touches. Like he throws his date into a dumpster to save her. And the whole problem in the comic is actually caused by him. We get kind of an interesting time loop, I guess, but not one to be taken too seriously. So I don't know. It's certainly the writer was putting a lot of work into it. The art was quite good by Rick Leonardi. Not as much pizzazz as he had back in the 90s, like with Spider-Man 2099, but he still feels like a very strong artist. Very nice coloring to go with his art. I wonder who colored it. I can't find the credits. Oh well. And I haven't yet read The Jetsons at the back, where I started reading it and it was like, I can't even tell that those are the Jetsons at all. I don't even remember them having those hair colors. But who knows? I'll go back to that. I presume that these back pages on these Hanna-Barbera team-up books are, in a sense, previews for more Hanna-Barbera comics that are coming. So there's going to be a whole Jetsons series that's done like this, which is half interesting and half not interesting. I think it's going to be kind of like with Wacky Racers and Scooby-Doo, where they're not really recognizably the same characters at all. And I guess even in the Flintstones, they really aren't. So the Flintstones transcended my initial disappointment in them not being very much like the Flintstones. Although I feel like the Flintstones, in some weird way, plays off of who the characters were in a clever way. Even though the writer says he wasn't really a fan of the TV show, which is a bit sacrilegious to me. I love the Flintstones. Space Riders Galaxy of Brutality. I loved the first Space Riders series, except for maybe the last issue was, the first 3 issues were like A pluses, and the last issue was maybe a B plus. But the artist, Rangel Jr., is that his? Fabian Rangel Jr. has really taken off. I mean, I love the art in the first miniseries, but it's so much better here. And yet totally the same, in the same vibe, but just pushed up to 11, if you will. So I just really, really loved the art. And I want this in an oversized hardback, to tell you guys the truth. And it's still... It kind of, I guess, is in the same zone as the Benjamin Marra art style, in the sense of it kind of feeling like the old underground comics artists who were very Wally Wood influenced and very EC Comics influenced, but brought in their psychedelic rock and roll underground punk, although they weren't punks, it was pre-punk when the underground was done, but kind of vibe. And this just captures that. But I feel it's hard to tell from the first issue, and maybe it'll take all 4 issues to tell, but I feel like the writer hasn't grown as much as the artist. In fact, I feel like I remember better characterization and touches of just interesting bits of writing, even though it's all very purposefully primitive, in the first series than I could find in this issue. There's nothing horrible or anything, but it just didn't seem like much going on with the writing. But it could all be set up for great stuff, so I can't tell for sure. And I certainly don't regret getting it for this fantastic art. There's some kind of preview at the back. I never read the previews in Black Mask comics, and I wish they would just put more content related to, like have some pinups or something from Black Space Riders, rather than a preview for this other comic called "There's Nothing There." A one-page ad for "There's Nothing There." I'd examine that more closely. I just don't want to read 4 pages of a comic book that will come out who knows when. Wow, I'm really moving through the stack here. I've been reading Motro from Oni Press, written by Ulysses Farina and art by Eric Freitas. And I really love the art, and it took me a while to get used to the writing because each issue moves forward in time, and they're almost like standalone short stories, but not really. And they're a little hard to understand on some level, but it's actually very cool, and it just feels, even though I guess it was touted a little bit as being commandy-ish, wouldn't really say that. I don't know how I would describe it. It's really its own thing of some kind of far future fantasy science fiction-y world with this character Motro, who is just way stronger than everyone else. And in the first issue, we see him as a boy. Then we see him as a young man. We see him in one issue sort of adopted by the king after he beats up the prince. I feel like I'm going to have to reread it, all the issues together. I'm not sure if it's just 4 issues or there's more to come, to sort of see all the connections between the different stories. But yeah, I'm not doing a great job of describing it, but it's really unique. Another one that would be great in an oversized hardback. Finally, I guess I've been sort of talking about pairs of comics. This pair came out, did it come out the same week or one week, one after the other? This is Lady Killer, which is written and drawn by Joelle Jones. Colors in here by Michelle Madsen. And so this is Lady Killer, issue 4. I think it's probably yes, that's to be concluded at the end. I think so. It's going to be a 5-issue arc. Can't remember if the Lady Killer 1, Volume 1 was 4 issues or 5 issues. I really like that, but I feel like she has upped the quality of her art even further. And this miniseries she wrote solo. The first one she had a co-writer. But her writing is excellent. Her storytelling, her pacing. So you got incredible art, incredible writing. All from Joelle Jones's imagination, her brain, her thoughts, her view of the world. It's very interesting. Just a delicious comic book. And then she's also, and I understand she signed an exclusive with DC, so I don't know if when Lady Killer wraps up, we won't be seeing many more indie comics from her, or maybe it just means we won't see her at Marvel. But book 2 of Supergirl being super, the art was better because Joelle Jones was doing her own inking, but it's not nearly as amazing art as in Lady Killer. It's very good art. I enjoyed it. And the story is just not quite for me. It hits the emotional tones too hard over the head. I think the writer is thinking that it's going to be teenage girls reading this story about a teenage girl, and that's totally fair. But I can't help but think that I actually like Joelle Jones as a writer better than Mariko Tamaki. Not that it's bad writing or anything, but I think Joelle, in her own comic book, has a much stronger sense of the timing and the way to unfold a story and how much information to give and how much information you don't need to give and that kind of thing. So I hope if she's mostly going to be doing stuff for DC, that DC lets her write and draw. I guess they don't let very many people do that. They either want you to be a writer or an artist. Did she write a short piece for one of their talent showcases or whatever? I thought I read that she did that. I did not buy that because I felt somehow offended by the fact that the people in it were already established professionals. Anyway, yeah, there's lots of good pages here. They just don't pop nearly as much as Lady Killer. I mean, you can just see the difference between the covers. The Lady Killer cover is just amazing. So anyway, Being Super is very fun in the sense of it being like an Elseworld story or a Vertigo approach to Supergirl. And my daughter hates it, so she's not reading it, but she'll probably like it a few years from now. But I'm really appreciating them, doing something different with Supergirl and doing this. And I really like this format. And it's quite a good deal because unlike the regular DC Comics, there's no ads at all. I think it's 48 pages, for a few dollars more than a regular comic. Where's the price on here? Oh, it's $5.99. So it's $6 instead of $3. It's more than twice as much as a $3 comic without the ads and with this nice binding and everything. So I'm definitely pleased with this. It's only by comparison to Lady Killer that I feel like there could have been something even better if they unleashed Joelle Jones all on her own on Supergirl. Okay, that's it for me now. I've been reading a lot of DC Comics, but I'm also way behind on a lot of them. I would love to do a video on Superman Reborn, but it may be too old of a subject by the time I have time to do it. In fact, I was thinking of rereading Superman, the 4 issues of Superman Reborn. I both liked it and had some quibbles with it. But I listened to a great podcast by our friend Eric of the Long Box Review podcast, where he just talked for 50 minutes about those 4 issues of Superman Reborn, and I highly recommend that. When I have time, I'll put a link down below. But just Google Long Box Review and you should find it. Okay, so who knows? Maybe I'll make a video when I'm off in Connecticut. Probably not, but maybe I'll have a chance. I'm bringing along a lot of comics to read, hoping to catch up at least on some of the series that I'm falling behind on. So it's going to be a DC-heavy trip to Connecticut. Okay, everyone. Have a good night. Well, it's probably not night for you, but anyway, have a good time, a good day, a good life. Talk to you later.